All right, well, welcome everyone to Let's Talk. We're talking about racism today, and I just want to welcome everybody who's tuning in live right now at e2church.com. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to tune into one of the most important conversations that as a church we probably have ever had. And we've talked a lot about some really important things, but I think tonight it really begins a conversation that never should be ended. It should be ongoing. And that's a conversation about racism, prejudice, racial reconciliation. And I thought, what better way to begin that conversation with our church than by inviting some of my closest friends, two people who I dearly love, people I would die for, my friend Jamal and my friend Josh, both here with me tonight. And I'm just really excited because I know that the experiences, the wisdom, and the knowledge that they have to share with you, it's expanded my mentality and it's challenged me deeply. And so before we get into anything, I want to welcome everybody who's tuning in. I know there are a lot of people tuning in from all over the country, maybe all over the world right now. And so in the chat, comment where you're tuning in from, state, city, country. Let us know where you're coming in. I'm live here in Sacramento, California. My friend Jamal tuning in from Chicago, and my buddy Biggie, who will be referred to as Biggie from now on, is in Dallas, Texas. And so put it in the chat where you're tuning in from right now. We want to connect with you. And if it's your first time, please let us know. We want to reach out to you and get connected. E2 Church is a place for you to belong. And so let us know if it's your first time tuning in. We call you a VIP. We're super excited that you're watching. Tonight on Let's Talk, it's a special edition. This is the first time I'm doing this live. And I'm going to be honest, this has been a topic that I'm just going to be real. It's something that I've always felt a little unqualified to talk about. And so that's why I got some of my closest friends with me. You guys know my name is Jared Ellis. I'm the senior pastor here at E2 Church. But I want my friends to introduce themselves real quick. Jamal, tell everybody where you're from, a little bit about yourself. Let people know who you are.
Great, man. Hey, once again, bro, thanks a lot for allowing us to come on this platform, man, and be able to share on such a sensitive topic, man, especially what's going on right now. But hey, everybody, my name is Jamal Miller. I am the CEO of Miller Media Group, and we get to have a portfolio of brands. One of the brands that is kind of well known is called Married and Young. Me and my wife launched that brand about 7 years ago when we got married, and since then it's grown into a multi-million-dollar media company, being able to reach millions of people around the world, which is a positive message of how to transform their life from the inside out. So I'm excited to be on this platform to be able to share. We live in Chicago. So we are in a big city that we're seeing a lot of this stuff happen that we're seeing today. So just once again, I'm excited to be here.
You have a beautiful family. Tell us about your family a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah. So I have a beautiful family, everybody. My beautiful wife, Natasha, and my amazing two girls, Harvest and Mel. Harvest is 4, Melody is 3, and they are literally the center of my life.
I feel like they're the center of my life whenever you post about them on social media. I cannot get enough of those two little girls.
That's the only reason why I have a good following.
Yes, leveraging your children. That sounds really great. I will say this, Jamal, one of my closest friends, I was in his wedding, he was in mine. He was my main competition in college, and we were close, but like it was always this weird like dynamic. And then after we got out of college, we were like, this is foolishness. We need to be friends. And ever since then, we've been super close. And so I love you, bro. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. Biggie, tell us about yourself.
Yes, sir. My name is Joshua Wright. I am from Houston, Texas, so don't forget it. And I have relocated to Dallas, Texas.
What is that?
Houston. That's the H-Town.
Okay.
I thought that was Hook 'em Horns. Isn't that Hook 'em Horns?
Hey, it's a whole bunch, but us Texans know what the main H-Town, Houston, Texas. I've moved to Dallas I went to Bible school with these two wonderful gentlemen, Jared Ellis and Jamal Miller, two powerful men of God. Y'all, I'm in amazing company. And now I am in stock trading world. I'm in the financial world, so I handle people's finances. You would never guess, but that's what I do. And I am also a Lapid Jew, which means I'm in Judaism. Also, I believe in the Messiah. So we are on the same team, and this is a beautiful conversation. I'm honored to be here, and may the Father use this as a great time and an awesome time to bring some revelation.
That's right. I think before we get into any of this, we need to address something because, Biggie, I mean, we're talking about racial reconciliation. We're talking about healing. I think you owe me an apology because for some reason you will not accept the fact that I can dance. And I've really
you
been—
can't dance, bro. Listen,
He tries really hard.
It's bad. And
What?
the
What's
fact that
wrong
you're a
with that?
musician, you can sing and you got rhythm, but
You got
you
so
look
many
like,
talents. So many
you
talents.
look like
guys.
a giraffe that just got born. Like you, you got 2 left feet, man.
Listen, I'm
You got
offended,
2 left
man.
feet. But I love you. It's
True.
all out of love.
It's real life.
What
It's
Texas
real
love
life.
be love,
I can
right?
dance. But hey, I try.
Right. Hey, and that's the most important part. As long as you try and get out there, have fun. You know.
That's right. Man, I'm not gonna lie, dancing at my wedding though, I threw down some moves.
You
did.
did, bro. You got busy.
Who was the best dancer at the wedding?
Brian Brown. No
Was
question.
getting it in. Brian put in that time. He said, listen, guys, I've been practicing for this moment. I'm about to show y'all what I got.
What does he do again? He's like breakdancing.
He was,
Yeah,
I mean, bro,
he was doing floor work and everything.
He gave that wedding work.
That's right. All right, let's get into this because the people are watching. Remember, if you're watching, you're tuning in live right now, comment in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your reactions. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to know what's impacting you and maybe even some of your experiences. I know that as we talk about some of these things, I just want to put a trigger warning out there from the very beginning. This is not a scripted conversation. I've got a few topics and a few questions that I know I want to ask these guys and some things that we're going to talk about. But I'm letting you know right now, this is not scripted and it is not, it's not politically correct. And so we're going to be talking about real life situations. We're going to talk about real things that have happened that are maybe all too familiar for some of you that are watching. I know there are many people right now that when we talk about these experiences of prejudice, racism, that you connect so personally to them that it's almost painful to even hear them. Many of my friends that I talk to, you know, sometimes it's like we flippantly say, hey, did you watch this video or did you see what happened? And when it's been something so personally connected to you, I often hear this response, man, I couldn't even watch it. I know, Biggie, you've told me that before.
Yes. You know me, just like you were saying in your text introduction of me. I'm a gentle giant. You know, I'm not a person who likes any type of controversy. I don't like confrontation. Is not something that I enjoy. I'm a person who wants to sit back and watch everybody have peace. So when yet another one of these situations happens, and you know, people do come for me, and I'm not trying to sound prideful at all, but people come to me and ask questions because they know that I can relate in some instance. So to get this flow, this you know, get blindsided by people asking, you know, have you seen this video? Have you seen this video? Have you seen this video? Unfortunately, we get numb. You know, as a black man, it's very easy to say that I've gotten numb to the added number, you know, because this number is increasing of the next hashtag. So yes, it is difficult for me especially, and I know that's not for everybody because everybody has a different perspective, but for me personally, it hurts. It hurts to see, to be forced to watch again and again and again another one of my brothers, unfortunately,
Recorded losing his life.
Yeah, I want to, and so I just want to make sure people know, like, as we talk about these things, not everybody is as maybe calloused as you might be to hearing some of this stuff, and others may be a little bit more sensitive. And so just be aware that everybody's going to intake this differently. But I think it's so important that we do this as unscripted as possible so that when we have these types of conversations, I told the guys this before we got on live, I said to you, you know, I want this to be a model for what people should be doing in their own communities and in their own relationships. Because if you don't have people in your life that look different, believe different, eat different food, come from different culture, if you don't have people that you can ask questions, and I know both of you, I've approached both of you with questions where I'm like, hey, I know this sounds stupid, but you got to explain this to me. Then what's going to happen is you're going to get tunnel vision. And that's kind of how I want to start this off. You know, when it comes to the topic of race, I grew up in New York, right? New York is completely different from where I went to college, which is the South, Texas. And in New York, I'll be real, not to say that it wasn't there, not to say that things weren't happening, but where I grew up, I didn't see a lot of blatant racism and prejudice. Now, I probably wasn't looking for it, but at the same time, I was the white kid that hung out with my black friends. And so I was the different kid that was kind of accepted into a different community. And so growing up, it just wasn't a thing in my mind that racism and prejudice was a reality. And so when I moved to the South and, you know, I was going to college and I heard some of these things, it was really hard for me to even accept that this is real until I had my first experience. And when I was in college, a buddy of mine invited me to come home to another southern state with him. And when we got to that state, we were going to stay with his family's house. And he told me, he said, hey, we're going to go to my grandmother's house. When we go there, I'm letting you know she comes from a different generation. She's kind of crazy. I don't know what's going to come out of her mouth. I just want you to be prepared. And I'm thinking to myself, like, no big deal. You know, she's probably like, she's just elderly, maybe a little senile. So we get into the house and we're getting food. She had cooked for us and she's got all these plates of food out and then these plates on the side for us to, you know, feed ourselves. And so I pick a plate up from the stack of plastic plates because I don't like cleaning dishes. That's just the truth. I don't want to, it's just like it's a habit. I pick up the plastic plate and this grandmother smacks the plate out of my hand and she says, don't use those. We don't eat like niggas. Now, I had never in my life heard that before. I mean, I knew people had said it. I knew it was something you don't say, but never in my life was I confronted with that word as used in a derogatory form to put down a type of person. I remember I took those plates, I threw them away, and I stormed out of the house. And my friend came after me, he's like, man, I told you, I'm sorry. And I could not justify in my mind. I was so angry. I said, I can't stay here. I can't be a part of this. And it was so eye-opening to me. For the first time, I'd really experienced this, and it was right in front of my face. The sad part is that it took about 20 years for me to come to the realization that this is a reality for people still to this day on a daily basis. And what I really want to do before we get into the, why is this so difficult for people to accept? Jamal, I want you to speak to this a little bit because, you know, your background and your upbringing was a little bit different. And you recently come into some experiences now that you're living in Chicago. I'd love for you just to share a little bit about where you came from and recently what's happened and how that has kind of shaped your mentality and exposure to some of this stuff.
Absolutely. I have a lot of recent transition in this topic in regards to just my position, my feelings. I grew up in the South. I grew up in, Monroe, Louisiana, where it was just a very, diverse school I went to. But the reality is there were the black kids and there were the white kids. There was the black side, there was the white side. And, me being grew up in a neighborhood where it was maybe 2 or 3 black families out of, 35, 40 white families in our neighborhood. I was coined the quote unquote black white kid, right? I spoke proper. I spoke this way. I didn't play football. I didn't play basketball. I played soccer. So I kind of grew up very desensitized to where I kind of just disconnected from, hey, I know how to get along with both races, and I know how to pass this situation where honestly the white people accepted me. The white people, oh, Jamal, he's cool, he's one of us, he did all that. I went through that junior high school where I was kind of rejected by the black kids because of how I presented myself and how I did certain things. And it really wasn't until I got into college that immediately in college is where I really found like, okay, like there's other black people, quote unquote, that are pursuing this and doing this and wanting to do that. And it's not really about like, oh, you sound black or you sound white, but it's more about what your passion is and what you desire to do in life. And those are the things that really connect you. And so that was my first time being liberated from like no longer being a color to my skin, being who I was. And so that lasted for a long time, guys, until literally this past, like, I would say, moving to Chicago, I haven't really experienced, I've lived in different neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, all the above. But this past week, I was traveling. I was in a town in Chicago that is not known to have a lot of Black people. And me and another Black guy and another Hispanic guy were working. We were getting ready to do a production at an Airbnb. And we are working, getting ready to get into the house. I realized I didn't have my key. And I got them in my car. I'm like, hey, guys, let's go back to my house. And mind you guys, like I am now a 7-figure CEO. I'm an author. I'm a father. I'm and I'll go back to just even to my, like, and I'm going to give you a flashback in a moment, but whenever this moment went down where we're in the car driving, I get cornered. One cop over here, cop to my left, cop in front, cop in back. And I'm like looking at my guy, I'm like, y'all, this is not a normal stop. Like, this is crazy. Police officer with the unmarked cars, get out of their cars, put on their bulletproof vests, and immediately come to my left, cops surrounding us, put your hands on the steering wheel. If you got your phone, put it on the dashboard and take out your license. And I'm looking like, y'all, what is going on? And just to kind of skip the story so I don't take details, but I end up learning that what we did, the sequence of events, they said, triggered because there were some illegal activities that's been happening in that area that we were. And what we did triggered some, I guess you can say, suspicion.
Wow.
And at that point, I'm like, okay. And they're like, and they immediately started interrogating us. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? What were you doing? Who you are? Like, I mean, just a full interview. I'm like, guys. And at the point, y'all, I'm kind of like a little bit of like in shock. I'm like, is this really happening? But I didn't have enough processing in that moment to realize what was really happening until they let us go, when they literally said, yeah, we're not going after small stuff. Like, we're going after big stuff. So, because we are 2 Black guys and a Hispanic dude, we doing big stuff, right? So, I mean, fully didn't even care who we were. Nothing at all. Just because of the color of our skin, we were triggered for suspicious activity, right? So at that moment, it was like, oh, snap. Now I'm gonna give you a flashback. Growing up, usually my color of my skin, being light skin, would get me away with stuff where I was not the one that would intimidate. I was not the one that would trigger people to feel like they weren't safe. Growing up, it was my older brother who was 6'4", dark skin, 275 pounds. I remember going to the store and white people would go to the other side because they see my brother coming and they, stay away from him. So I never experienced this direct. But today, y'all, walking in my neighborhood, I'm not talking yesterday, walking in my neighborhood, I see a white guy and a white woman walking down the same path as me, and they see me and they cross over to the other side. What my brother used to experience, now today, you would think that there would be some form of progression. Y'all, it's 2020, and I'm here to say racism is here. It's real. It's traumatizing. I have never been the one to really jump on this type of thing, but I'm here today as we're kind of cracking this thing open to say I'm realizing it's more real than I've given credit for, and it's definitely a problem. And I had to go back on my social media because when I did my moment, I was laughing. I was kind of like, oh, this is crazy, y'all. I can't believe this happened. We got cop cars. I had to go back on my social media and say, yeah, y'all, what y'all saw was not okay.
Wow.
Yep.
Biggie, talk to me a little bit. You know, you are obviously, and what I love about the both of you is that you're both passionate about truth, and in your own ways you communicate it strongly. Yet at the same time, I think that, you know, you come from the opposite end of the spectrum. You're a big dude, and maybe one of the gentlest, kindest people I've ever met. I think the only time I've ever seen you do anything towards me that was violent was that one time at camp when you were making me mad because you were not letting me take a nap, and I tried to punch you in the stomach and it didn't work. That was so stupid. But you're a big dude, and yet even though you're one of the most gentlest guys I know, just because of your size, wherever you've gone, there has been this suspicion. Tell us a little bit about your experience with this.
Absolutely. Just like you said, and just so everybody can gotta get stats, I'm right at 6 foot, about 340 pounds, and so I'm a big boy. So, and I'm not the only one. My dad is 6'4", pushing 400. My brother is 6'2", 270, 280. So we come from a family of large, heavy black men. When we enter a room, not on purpose, just by our presence, we're noticed, period. And so it's really funny, and this is what I'm so grateful for my parents for sitting me and my brother down and letting us know, you will not be seen like everybody else. You will not have the experience everybody else has. And to be honest, it takes actual experience to have that happen, for it to click, you know? Because until something happens, it's just like you're just giving me information. And so psychologically, it clicks when something happens. And so as far as and I honestly have to thank God for this, I haven't had too many thick, like Jamal's story, I thank God I don't have that story. Thank God I don't. But I can definitely attest, there's one specific situation. I was here in Dallas, Cedar Hill. Y'all remember White Rhino Coffee? I had gone with a white lady friend to a midnight show of a movie. Gone to the movie. We met at White Rock Coffee earlier that day, and we said, hey, we're just going to park there. One of us will drive. We'll come back to it later, you know. So the movie's over. I end up dropping her off at White Rock Coffee. Now, I get out of the car. I gentleman her out of my passenger door, gave her a hug. We're talking 30 seconds to a minute, right? She pulls out of White Rock Coffee, ends up going down 67. I'm right behind her. I'm talking 3-5 seconds behind her. We get onto the highway. All of a sudden, I see the blue and reds. And I was just like, okay, you know, I was none the wiser at the moment, none the wiser. I pull over, you know, 10-4 or whatever, you know, on hands on the steering wheel. My parents had taught me, you know, I wasn't foolish. And the officers say, yes, sir, we're pulling you over for leaving the business at a suspicious hour. And I said, okay, sir, well, if you saw me leave the business, you saw me talk to the white woman that I dropped off for her car, and they wouldn't have it. You know, they ran my stuff and all that. I had to give them my movie stuff and my receipt for IHOP to prove as a witness what I was doing that day. And honestly, it didn't hit me right at the moment. The girl I was with called me because she saw what was going on after she pulled up over the side of the road. Thank God for a woman who has discernment. She pulls over to the side of the road and wait until I got up. She said, what was going on? And she was like, and after I was talking to her, I was like, you know, I just realized I experienced a racial situation. They saw both of us, but they pulled me over, you know? And so it takes some of these experiences to really realize the climate of the culture that we're in. And just one more quick one. Since I don't have that many situations, I had to call my dad and my brother to ask them, hey, what are some of your experiences? My dad is from Oklahoma. My mom's from Kansas. They married and moved to Texas in the 80s, early 80s. My dad told me when he was driving down to the Galveston area, we passed through a city called Channelview. There was a sign that said home of the KKK on a billboard. And not on a billboard, And so what I would hope to get across in this situation is psychological understanding that black men have to go through. It's one thing hearing it, it's another thing experiencing it. And until you marry the two, sometimes it don't make sense. And so that's the story, but that's definitely a point I want to hit.
So with all this said, my story with both of y'all's experiences with so many more, right? It's just 3 stories out of the millions that so many African Americans can relate to. Why is it so hard for people in our society to come to a place of admission that racism and prejudice still exists today? Like, in my mind, I'm already hearing, like subconsciously, I'm hearing the flags go up, right? Well, the police are just doing their job, or, well, you read into that situation, or, it wasn't really what you say it is. Why is it so difficult for people to admit that this is really happening? And what are some of the factors that cause people to constantly question the existence of racism right now? Jamal, why don't you kind of kick that off?
I really think the thing is that we all grew up in different, we all grew up with different experiences. And I think the thing is this, I remember, my sister, when she got pregnant as a teenager, right? And I grew up, we were all pro-life. And I remember the moment when it hit home. And it was like, oh snap, my sister is about to have a baby before her senior year of high school. And I remember the discussion for abortion being put on the table. Wow. And it was just like, oh, this is not me praying for somebody that I don't know, that I'm praying, God, come on, nigga. No, this is my sister, that her life is about to be changed forever because she's about to have a baby. And I think that's the thing when it comes to racism, that the true reality is that it's so hard to step into the shoes of someone that went before it hits home, and before it comes to your front door. And the reality is most Caucasians will never be able to have the opportunity or have to go through what we go through. So they're trying their best to step into the shoes, and it's so hard for them because the reality is they don't know what it's like to literally do everything right and be everything right and still be judged simply because of the color of your skin. It's just like, it doesn't make sense because they've never had to go through or fear or face it. So I think that's the thing. It's like, but that's on the white side. It's like, hey, we are trying our best to sympathize and empathize, and it's true. But I think that's the part, and I see it now where it's like, hey, how can they be a part of the solution? How can we all bind together and figure this thing out and go through it? But it's almost the same concept of slavery. This is the kind of stuff that truly does not happen overnight. But you would think that we would be much further along. So I think the question now becomes, what is the real root of this? Yeah. And you've had a lot of pastors say it, right? Racism is the seed of hate. It is the spirit of hate. It is a spirit that is deeper than just a decision. It truly takes a soul transformation, because the reality is that the color of your skin is not the only form of racism. You can be racist towards so many different ways in regards to whether it be a social status, whether it be, there's so many different levels to it. And it's not only white people, man. I grew up where I saw black people just as much. You know what I'm saying? I grew up with a Muslim uncle that literally would swear to the Bible that the white man was the devil, and would sit there and would look at a white man and don't even care, wouldn't ask him his name, would not care about who he is, but simply because of the history of what your family and your lineage have done to us, I now have the right to hate you. So y'all, this is bigger than just a decision oh no, I don't understand. But it really does say, in order for us to change this thing, I think we have to do a better job of actually studying the root of this and informing ourselves, and not just passing it off as, oh, that's their problem, or that's just happening in our culture and our world. But no, the same thing. Yeah. Right now, I think we've got to do a better job stewarding. The Bible says, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. I think the reality is that because we aren't taking the due diligence to study, be informed, and know how to actually be a part of the solution, that we're just continuing to perpetuate the problem.
Yeah. And I think that brings up the topic of privilege, which a lot of people, it's a trigger word, right? what is that? Or doesn't even exist, but what you just explained really put a definition to privilege, which is that I have never had to worry about walking down the street because of the color of my skin, because I might be seen as a threat. And I've never had to worry, even if I'm thinking about children, having children one day, I never thought, man, because my child is going to be of a certain race, I'm going to have to worry about them being interrogated or being profiled as something that they're not. And I think that it's so important that for somebody who is Caucasian, not only to hear the stories of other people, but then to also admit privilege. It doesn't mean you're evil, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it does mean that you have a very different history in this country than African Americans. And there is a privilege. Whenever I was talking about it this week, you know, the difference between a Dylan Roof, right? And what we saw happen this week is that this guy gets out of killing multiple people in a Bible study, and he gets to go to Burger King. I mean, he gets arrested having been armed and committed murder, and George Floyd gets killed in the street for check fraud, right? Like, that's privilege, right? There's a difference there in the way that people were treated, yet the crime was so starkly contrasted. And I think as a white person, it's so important for us to recognize and to be able to admit, because there's one thing to listen to somebody, it's another thing to connect with them. And what I've learned about relationships is I can't connect with you until I put myself in a position of humility and teachability. And Biggie, I want you to speak to this, because I think a lot of white people almost feel like they've got something to lose if they do that. If they admit that there's privilege, or if they admit that maybe there's a problem, then I'm going to lose position, or I get lumped in as being racist. And I'm not racist. I love everybody. How could I be racist? And so how would you address somebody, and maybe it's the difference between racism and prejudice and how one might lead to the other. How would you address somebody that would be saying to you, well, I'm not racist, so I can't say I have privilege? How would you speak to somebody like that?
Yes. The word that comes to mind is diversify. Diversification. One thing that people miss, Will Smith said it the other day, this isn't new. People just have phones and are recording it, right? If you're not seeing it, your diversity is not wide enough. Your field of influence, you're living in an echo chamber, right? And so you need to diversify what you're reading. You need to diversify your social media feed. You need to diversify your friend group. And this isn't just white and black. This is Native American, Indian, Asian. This is the slice of heaven, right? You need to have a picture of what everybody's experiences are. Because then when you can go and look and say, look what he's living through as opposed to what I'm living through. And not just these one-offs that happen every few months. When you see that this happens often, when you see that this is something that pretty much we live daily, then your scope goes from here to here. You know, you start seeing, oh, I am privileged. Oh, I am. And to even speak to that deeper, once that scope is widened, just like if Jared, if me and Jamal were coming with you to some place and you know that there was a different racial tension than what we're used to, I would trust you enough to say, hey, we're going into a place. I love you, Biggie. I know that we're going to a place that doesn't have the same racial climate that we are in, that we're from, you know? And so diversification is going to open up the scope. And this is huge. This is why this conversation is so huge. This is why I didn't even let you finish asking the question when you asked if I wanted to do this. Yes, people need to see everybody's vision. The perspectives need to be widened. So I would say that for a person who doesn't believe they have privilege, look at somebody else's experience.
And I think this happens a lot in the church, right? Because I think that we're afraid if we expand our exposure to different ideas, that somehow we might lose what we hold close to ourselves, right? Like it happens in faith. People want to go deeper in their understanding of God, yet they never study other religions or they never study anything outside of Christianity. So then they don't have actual answers. They've never exposed themselves to anything else. And what I guess I would try to appeal to people in is, listen, just because you expose yourself to a different ideology or a different expression or a different culture doesn't mean you have to lose yourself, but it does mean that you're taking an initiative to understand that your reality is not everybody else's reality, right? Yeah. Growing up in white suburbia is not the same reality as everybody else. And I think I was exposed to that because even my sister, right? My sister, we adopted her from Korea when she was young, and she grew up in a white household. That's really all she knew. Yet when she went to school and there were Asian kids around her, she was either not Asian enough or she wasn't white enough, right? There was this tension because her reality, just based on her race, created a dichotomy and a separation now, and her identity became rattled of who am I and how do I become accepted? And I think that it's so important that if we are really going to understand each other, we got to listen. We got to be able to go where other people are before we demand them come to us, which really leads to kind of the next question I have for you guys, which is, what are some things that white people may not be able to relate to that can help expand our mindset of pressures, fears, things that you think about that I never have to think about, right? Situations that you're aware of that I never am aware of because I'm a white male, right? It's my privilege that I don't have to think about that because I'm not looking at situations of my people being murdered in the street, right? And so, whoever wants to go first, but what are some things that white people may not be able to relate to that by you sharing could broaden their horizons of what is actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, what you wear whenever you walk out the house.
Yeah.
So for me, literally today, I'm wearing a black shirt, black jeans, tennis shoes. I'm looking like I already know. I'm like, okay, I need to put on a different color shirt so I don't like that right there. What I wear when I walk outside my house. Number one. Number two, when I'm by myself. So you gotta know when I'm with my little girls, that's not intimidating because now immediately people see him as, oh, he's a family man. He won't do anything. He won't hurt me. He won't do anything to me with his girls, right? Okay, like I am having to literally think, how do I look to someone else when I walk outside my house now, right? Like I'm having to think that for them to desensitize them. Another one, right? It's crazy. There's another one. Literally, I have to speak up because I don't want to further perpetuate the problem of being a black male that just, doesn't know where he's at, what he's doing. So literally, if somebody walks by me in my neighborhood, hey, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. I'm having to purposely, because I know they will keep their head down and keep walking. And if I don't, then that potentially could be, hey, somebody's in our neighborhood, because that happened to me before, which I forgot that story. I remember one time I was walking in my neighborhood on the phone. I forgot about this story. And somebody walked by me and I didn't speak to them, right? I end up walking back to my house. Cop shows up at my house. Hey, son, do you live here? Yes, this is my home. We got a call for some disturbance in the neighborhood. Do you mind if I see that, can you prove to me that you live here? I said, well, sir, I don't feel comfortable with you walking in my home. But literally I'll let you, he's like, well, that's okay. Can I just see a family photo or something? So literally I had to open my door to my house and show him a family photo so I could prove that I lived here, because I knew that lady that I walked by called the cops on me in my own neighborhood because she suspected me of suspicious behavior. So now that's trained me. Hey, Jamal, whenever you're walking around, y'all, it's crazy that I'm pulling up all these stories because that I have to speak and make sure that I'm presenting myself as I'm not one of them. You can trust me. I'm not the ones you see on TV. I'm not the ones you think you tell your daughters about that you got to be careful of whenever they go out in public. Like I'm not one. I've got to make sure that. So y'all, like, it's crazy the stuff that has to go through my mind in order to make sure. And I don't have a son yet. I have girls, right? So I know when I do get a son, I'm going to have to train him on how to be black in America.
Right.
And
Right.
most importantly, the reality is that more than likely they will have to live in a diverse neighborhood, because I know that we already are more, quote unquote, we're affluent, whatever you want to call us. I don't know how to say it, but the reality is that I've got to teach them how to be around white people.
Yeah.
Because more than likely you're going to be looked at and look crazy at. So those are some of the things I can say that, you would never know that we have to think about before we go walk out our door.
And to piggyback off of Jamal, you hit it perfectly. This is the reason I'm wearing a black hoodie today. Think about that. If it's cold out one day, you could wear a hoodie. You could wear a hoodie and be totally fine, But for us, wearing a hoodie because I'm totally covered up and I got something baggy on. Oh, he's got a gun. He's holding a gun. And Jamal's completely right. And it's funny, Jamal. I wanted to pull this up. We suppress so much that happens to us.
Yeah,
because if we don't suppress it, we wear it.
Yeah.
And it messes with you.
And I don't want to turn on my white friends, and I don't want to look at y'all like y'all are the problem, or y'all, because I know it's hard. It's so like, could you suppress, and you're like, well, this is just jacked up. But I gotta keep going.
That brings up a really important thing, because we talk about protest, we talk about rage, anger, just outcry, and a lot of common responses to seeing things like that, from whether it be the Caucasian community or anybody else, will just see it and look, I can't believe that they would react that way. And what you're really saying right now is, I don't want to be an angry black man, right? Like, I don't want to be the angry black man that's constantly bringing up race. But when we talk about protests and we talk about outcry, I mean, can you speak to that a little bit, of why there is such a reaction? I mean, the weeping and the cries and the rage, what has to be there deep seated, that when these types of things happen, it's just like pulling off the Band-Aid to a wound that's infected and is not healing?
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question, Jared, you're talking about like what the reaction after something like this happens?
Yeah, like when people see protests, they often misunderstand why that's happening, or they're just being too angry, or but this outcry is coming from something deep. It's coming from wounds that have been inflicted over and over again. And so, what is that? Explain a little bit more so people can understand, like, that, because you're saying we suppress this. I don't want people to see this, but at the same time, this does express itself, and sometimes it's not so pretty.
Right, exactly. And just like we started out, as far as my personality, I'm a suppressor. I'm a person who doesn't want to blow up. I'm a person who doesn't want to go that route. But there definitely are people that do. And I want to point out black women. Thank you, black women. Thank you for a mother that prays for me. Jamal, I'm sure your wife and your mother prays for you. And we often see the outrage come through them, and then we follow suit, because just so you know, the woman's the neck, the man's the head, so we can't turn without her. But in our suppression, usually they're the ones that are speaking out. And so there's this dichotomy that's made in that, like, they hear our frustrations. They're the ones who, hey, babe, I can't, I experienced this, I got the cops called on me, or, I went to the elevator and the lady clutched her purse, she didn't know that I worked in the building, and so there's this, I'm so grateful for these women, because they can voice, and then they often get labeled as the crazy black woman in our stead. You know what I'm saying? I talked to my mom today, and she was crying, talking to me. And she was like, Josh, you don't understand what your father went through when he moved to Texas. We came from the Midwest. And so going down, went to a Holiday Inn to get his first place, total vacant or completely open, and they wouldn't give him a room, or, situations like that. So as far as what you see, as far as the outrage, know that it's not as bad as it could be. It really isn't. And what we need to realize as a society and what's going on is if we don't change, it's going to get worse. You talk about, and I don't want to be that person who's like prophesying doom and gloom, but when people are so hurt and this stuff continues to happen, it's not going to be as peaceful as it has been in the past. You're not going to get a Kaepernick.
You know, I was thinking about that because watching that video I don't know if you watched all 10 minutes of it. I forced myself to sit there and watch it because I think for me it's important that I have to feel that, you know, because it can just be a brief news clip for a week cycle and then it's gone, you know? And
Right.
I thought it was so interesting that while this was all happening in front of this crowd, this man who's videotaping it still, I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm watching the video and I'm thinking to myself, I would go to jail to do something. And then I'm thinking to myself, but how much fear do you still have to feel? Like all you can do is sit there with a camera, because if you raise your hand, you could be the next body on the floor, right? Like if you step in. And so even there, that's something that I can't comprehend. And so when we look at rage and you know, this expression of frustration and pain, I think we've got to understand that there's been so many instances of watching and feeling powerless to do anything. And so in a moment, you know, this protest, it really is the voice of the people expressing, and this is what we feel. And I love that you said this when it comes to Black women. I think there are so many mothers that are living in such fear, that have buried so many boys, that their anguish is now being channeled through their sons, that feel like I've got to do something, like I got to gain the attention, because I mean, I'm a mama's boy. If my mom's hurting like that, I got to do something, you know, I can't sit by. And so Jamal, tell me a little bit about this. You know, I'm seeing a lot of comments, and I want to just say this real quick because I know a lot of my E2 Church people are watching right now. I want to commend you, because this week when I posted what I posted about the George Floyd situation and racism, I didn't receive one negative comment from my church, for anybody in my community in Elk Grove. And I want to commend our church, because I know a lot of pastors right now that have been calling me saying, I am getting emails and text messages and comments constantly criticizing and bringing something up. And I just want to thank you, because I believe our church is really, not only are we a diverse church, but I believe that we are a church that's open to a conversation like this. Yet, time after time, there's going to be comments like, well, it's an election year, and the media bias is trying to put this in front of us to divide the country. Well, you know, he did this. And there are things that I'm sure you already anticipate to hear when something like this happens, right? And so what would you say to that crowd, right? People who they're like, nope, this is media bias. I mean, I know I've seen things all over social media this week. What would you say to people that are just closed off and refuse to receive the narrative as this is an issue?
I would tell them, go to the nearest mall. I don't know. I know we're in COVID-19, but I would say go find your Black person and sit them down and talk and have a conversation. Like, I think a lot of white people just honestly don't have Black people around them. They don't have Black friends. They don't have Black associates. They don't have Black anything. And there are plenty of white people that don't have any Black people around them that are great, that are amazing, that are loving, that are genuine, that are kind, but they just haven't taken a moment to even have a conversation, to even hear real time, what are you going through right now? Because at the end of the day, bump the media, bump the conspiracies, bump all that stuff. The truth is, it's happening, it's real. And I would just tell you, go find a Black person and have a conversation. And just be like, hey, I just want to talk, because I just want to better understand how do you do this? Find somebody you can trust. I don't know. I just think you're just out of touch.
Yeah.
And I think you are allowing other people to dictate your philosophy, your reality, versus you having real time, putting in real time effort to understand the problem that's really happening in our world, in our society. And I think by you just simply having a conversation with somebody, I think that's a great effort versus you turning on the TV and trying to just form your own opinions off of, yes, what the media is saying for you to do. And I think you're going to just end up in a hamster wheel cycle versus really being able to, like what you're doing, bro. I'm sure you listening to me and Biggie right now is giving you more of a real time, like, dang, like you're having a conversation with us. Yeah. And you're stepping out and you're willing to get real, that you don't understand it, which I love that that concept. Like, dang, white people almost feel like accepting that there's a problem makes them like they are a part of the problem. No, man, like just like the black folks out here that hate white people, and you know what I'm saying? I don't consider that I'm just because I'm black, and you know, if I admit that that's wrong and I admit that that's a problem, that you know what I'm saying, that I'm a part of it. No, I think by calling it out and being honest, which I've seen some of my white friends and white pastors, I'm like, listen, real talk. I know you, and you're admitting I don't get it, I don't understand it, but I'm telling you what I see and what I'm seeing is wrong.
Yeah. And I think
Can I piggyback on that too, Jared?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to talk about this from an ethics standpoint. When people automatically try to say, try to put a conspiracy behind it, they are not being like Christ. And the idea that they are not allowing somebody to grieve. Scripture itself allows ample time for people to grieve when they've lost somebody. You have to be able to process it, and you have to be able to let your emotions out to be known. But people are so self-centered as opposed to being other-centered that all they want to do is have a response, which is not right. It's not right. It is not right. And when you see pain like this, you have to allow people the ample time to grieve, let it out. And then once the wound starts to heal, once the laceration starts to grow back together, the skin starts to grow back together, then you can appropriately approach the conversation as to what has happened. But to knee-jerk reaction and to say it's selfish, plumb out, outright selfish. So I just wanted to add that.
I think too, like, there's a difference between going and having a conversation with a black person to justify your already like made up mind. And I think a lot of people, they'll drop that line, well, I got black friends, right? I got a black friend, this is the way it is. And the mindset in that is, I've got somebody in my back pocket that can justify the way I think so that I feel okay about it. And I think that for me, something that's been eye-opening is that sometimes the people in my life that think differently than I do are actually right, and I'm not. And because I come into that conversation with a presupposition of what I already believe to be true, I actually shut myself off from learning anything. And so I think it's so important that we are allowing ourselves to not feed our ego and pride. And we were talking about this yesterday, Biggie, that, so much of what I've seen, whether it be, the guy not taking his knee off of George Floyd's neck, or the other police officer, or regardless, remember, this doesn't make every single cop evil, and it doesn't make every white person racist. But I think that we've got to recognize that ego plays so much of a role in how little we learn from one another. Because if I can't admit that I'm wrong, or that I'm going overboard, or that I'm taking a narrative to a place that it is not real, if I can't admit that I don't understand everything, and that maybe just because I haven't lived through it, that doesn't mean that it's not real, then I'm never in a position to ever grow. And I think if you are a follower of Christ, your main priority has to be in loving God and loving people. And if your priority is to love people, then you've got to learn how to grow, because we all have prejudice in us, whether we know it or not. Even me, who I love my black friends, and I hate the idea of racism. That doesn't mean I don't have prejudice. I married a Vietnamese girl, and guess what? Being married to a Vietnamese girl in a very Vietnamese family has exposed that I have prejudice in my heart to the Asian community that I didn't even know. Am I racist towards them? Do I hate them? No. But I was raised in a privileged culture where we could make fun of stuff and it wasn't ever held accountable. Where we could say things like, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, right? That's the same problem. On both sides of the aisle, we've got this issue. And so as we're kind of nearing the end of this conversation, I do want to speak about that really quickly. I want you to talk about maybe jokes, stereotypes, pressures that you feel to be black, or whatever that looks like from culture, society, even the African American community. What are some things that, in your opinion, just need to stop? Like, what are some things that are not helping when it comes to moving forward in unity and diversity?
Number one, diversification, of course, which I've already talked about, is a major thing. You need to diversify the feed. But we're getting to a place where everybody has a voice. Everybody's got some type of social media platform that they can say something. And because of that, the exposure is thicker and heavier, we have to be far more careful about how we talk about prejudices. Me liking grape Kool-Aid and watermelons and chicken. Cut it out. Cut it out. Because, just like you said, I have prejudices too. I never realized that, I thought every Asian person was good at math. That's a prejudice, And so we need to not necessarily think that we're too much of a sensitive culture. We need to understand that these things are ringing bells because they're at a place of sensitivity and it's something that is not right. You know what I mean? And you like chicken just as much as I do. Everybody want 2 cups of sugar in their Kool-Aid. Like, what the heck? Like, this isn't something that we should cause, that should divide us. These are things that should bring us together. Is that not what heaven's going to be? Is that not what it's going to be when we get to the end? Everybody's culture is going to come in. A piece of everybody's beauty is going to come in, and we're going to have this amalgamation of diversity, and that's the goal. It's the goal, and so that's my little take on that.
Yeah, man. I think the first thing is that has to stop is the lying to yourself that it doesn't exist, that it's not happening, that it's not here. I think it is every person agreeing that there is a problem, right? And if there is a problem, how can we all come together and find the solution? This is not that's their problem. This is not I don't got to worry about that because I'm not racist. The reality is that we all play a part in this. And I think being able to take responsibility for your part is huge. And I think when it comes to the jokes and when it comes to all the other things that happen, clearly social media is one of the biggest places where there's a lot of denial happening. And so I think the thing is now, like, a lot of people don't know what to do. Some people are like, do I post? Do I not post? Do I comment? Do I not comment? And I think being able to, have a safe place, whether you're white or black or whatever race you are, Hispanic, Asian, having a safe place to be able to talk through these things. Stop ignoring like it doesn't exist. Find you a safe place to truly vent out your heart. Because if you do not vent out and find out what's really in you and what you really believe about a thing, it will come out. I promise you. And I'm telling you now, you at some point you're going to be forced, just like Jared was forced whenever he married his wife. That thing had to come out and he had to see it and face it. And so even though he had a sister that was Asian, he grew up, he still has stuff in his heart. And I think each of us, even to say, hey, we all have some form of prejudice in our heart. Where is it? Where is it at? Yeah. Talk that thing out and be able to repent and then give that thing to Christ and say, God, take this thing, help me with this, wrestle with God with it, so you can be able to be a catalyst for change. Yeah. So I would be, that's my thing to you, would be stop ignoring it, stop denying it, and be someone that can agree that if you are denying it, if you are ignoring it, you are a part of the problem.
Yeah. we're going to land this plane. The last question I want to ask you guys, you can sit on it for a few minutes, is, to anybody who's not African American, anybody who's not Black, what can they do to be a part of the solution practically? And in just a second, I want you to answer that. I do want to say this. I had a guy come up to me one time, and whose guy I was close with, and he said to me, Pastor Jared, I never knew that I really struggled with racism or prejudice, but years and years ago, I had a family member of mine who was raped, and she was raped by a Hispanic man. And because of that instance, I started to realize that I had hatred in my heart towards the Hispanic community, and it laid there dormant for years. But what I found coming out of my mouth whenever I would see somebody is it would start as jokes, but those jokes reflected there was something deeper in my heart. There's something that I saw, something that I experienced that created in me a hatred for somebody else. And what I would say is that as a Christian, we've got to have the mentality of the psalmist. And the psalmist said this: create in me a clean heart. Search me, try me, see if there be anything in me that does not line up with the holiness and the purity of God. And I think that when we put ourselves in a defensive position, we're trying to prove ourselves right, we're trying to justify our beliefs, our politics, we move ourselves away from the heart of what a Christian really is. And what the heart of a Christian is humility, teachability, God. There may be things in me that I don't know about, but you got to reveal them. And the way he often does that is through other people. I know that for me, having these types of conversations, what I love about this conversation hasn't been hard because it's not the first time we've talked about this. We've had these conversations. I remember when I was living in Reading, Jamal, this was years ago, and I would call you up and I would ask you questions about this stuff because I knew that if I was going to be able to speak to people of all different types of races, that I was going to have to learn that I didn't know everything. And so I think that for believers, for Christians, that's got to be our heart posture. And so real quick, as we kind of land this plane to conclude this, what would you say to people who are really at the place in their life where they're like, I want to help, but does posting make a difference? Like, should I say something? Like, what can I really do? Like, how can I make a difference? Because I don't want to be somebody that just hates the police, or I don't want to be somebody that just denies I want to really be a part of the solution, but what do I do? What would you say to them? How could you help them right now? People who are watching right now, how can you help them to grow in this season?
Absolutely. Number one, and we hit on this topic earlier, come at this childlike. Do not come at this from a position that you know something. No. Children are sponges because they come into learning something from a place of ignorance and they admit it. Well, it's not even they admit it, it's natural to them. Teach me as if I know nothing. Number one, practical things you can do. And I spoke to you about this before, Jared, before we start recording, because, when you made the ad and all that, I started getting responses from a lot of my white lady friends. Biggest thing you can do is not be silent. You saying something, because people don't get it. Your platform, you reach people I will never reach.
You're talking about white women, right?
White women specifically, and not just white women specifically, anybody, but I want to speak to white women here because I think this is really important. Your platform is major. And I also said I wanted to talk about the Amy Cooper situation. If you put a clip in there of that situation or whatever so people know what that situation is. Often the thing that has caused a scar is awesome, that is also the antidote for the pain. So for my white sister to post, hey, I don't know how to say anything, but I know that what happened to George Floyd was wrong. That alone is massive, and it's huge, and it gets a conversation flowing, and it gets people starting to talk about it and think about their ideals, right? And so that would be number one. And to be more practical as far as what you can do, you can call your local police department. are all my officers, or all the officers that are in my place have body cameras, so they don't have an excuse, so we can see these things. What is your method of choosing police officers? Is there any type of actual vetting process that you go through? Will they have social media? Are they posting racist stuff before they come into the fold to protect and to serve? And I would also have people look up MLK quotes about being silent. I wish I would have written some of it down so I could have it, but just look up MLK quotes. You being silent is the worst thing you can do. So speak out, say something.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think Biggie really hit on some great ones. I think from my vantage point, when it comes to like, what can you do? I think everyone has a different level of responsibility.
Yes.
And I think everyone that you're watching right now, what level of responsibility that you have and what you can do. Some of you, honestly, the biggest responsibility and authority you may have is prayer. Like, you may only have the authority to truly go before God and cry out to him for solutions and ideas, and to be able to see something change in the spiritual realm as it pertains to this demonic force that is trying to take our world. That may be the authority you have. Or you may be one that has a lot of wealth and a lot of money, where you have access to very affluent people that have a lot of power, that have the ear to government officials, that have the ear to people that can truly make change in this society and your society, in your community. Why? Get a hold of them. Take responsibility for the authority and the access you have to actually hold a conversation, to hold an event. For example, what you're seeing Jared is taking responsibility for the platform that he has, and he's saying, hey, I'm going to be a part of the solution by having a conversation. This is him saying at his level, he's not, I'm not going to just be a pastor that prays. I'm not going to be a pastor that just sits back and just like comments or makes a post. I'm actually going to have an event. This is his level of responsibility. So you have to ask yourself, what level of responsibility do I have? And what can I do to be a part of the solution and actually see change? And you may be one that is a government official. You are a police officer. You are one that is a senator. I don't know who may be listening to this. Your father may be somebody that's political, that could actually get on a stage and actually begin to bring policies and put policies in place. Like Josh said, cameras being used whenever for police officers. What is the thing that you have the access and the authority to do? Do it.
Yep.
That's what I would say. Don't settle for just a small little token of posting and commenting. If that is your level of authority, thank God, praise God. Thank you for saying something in the comment. Thank you for saying, thank you, Pastor Jared, for doing this. This is amazing. Thank you for calling out your friends that do racist jokes. Thank you for doing. We all have something we can do to be a part of the solution. And you have to ask yourself, what can I do? And then say, I'm going to commit to doing this because I know this is what's right. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy, because guess what? Anything that is worth doing is never easy. Anything that has any type of drastic challenge is not going to be easy. So don't expect for it to be something you want to immediately just be like, oh yeah, I can do that. And more than likely, if it's easy, then it probably is something that you can just do too easy, right? And so I think you got to think about the thing that could be hard and just do it. And just do it.
Right. So much wisdom. I think people might even be saying, well, like, how do I say something if I don't know all the facts? Listen, we have to call sin, sin. And when you see murder, you call it what it is. You say it's wrong. And sometimes the situation is a little bit more blurry than this situation that happened with George Floyd this week is as clear as day. There's no way you can misconstrue what that was. That was murder. That was wrong. It was sin. It's not even difficult for me to call it what it is. But there may be situations where you feel like it is a little bit more blurry. Let me encourage you with this. Empathize without excuses. What do I mean by that? A lot of times I'll see people post this. It's kind of like in a marriage, like when you tell your wife you're sorry, and there's a but attached to it, and you go around the apology to justify why you did what you did, that's not an apology. And I can let you know by experience, it's not going to go very far. So when you empathize, but then you make a subtle comment after that, trying to make an excuse for something, you nullify the empathy. You cross it, you cancel it out. And so what I'm just challenging you to do is, when people are hurting, hurt with them. The Bible says, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice. If a community that you love, people that you love are hurting, and there's something, maybe you don't understand all the details, that doesn't mean you can't empathize. You can still empathize, and you don't have to add an excuse to it. Another thing I would really encourage you to do is to continue the conversation. Listen a lot more than you speak, and ask a lot of questions, even when they feel dumb. I've asked Biggie a lot of stupid questions that stupid question led to a major revelation and breakthrough in my heart, because I had somebody who, number one, loved me enough to be honest with me, but also was willing to go there. And I think that there's something to be said about equity in friendships, that you can't just have this deep level of conversation with just anybody, right? Like Biggie and Jamal and I, we've been friends for years. I mean, this has been going on for over 10 years. Yeah, and so we have equity with each other. I can tell a story, or they can share with me something. They can get angry, and I'm not going to get offended by it, because I know where they are. I know who they are. And so I would say, don't just have friendships to say you have friendships. Really build relationship and deep equity with those people, and ask, man, how deep does this relationship go? Because the level of depth that it goes in is how it's gonna allow us to have the harder conversations. And lastly, this is the last thing I want to encourage you with, is in whatever situation you're in, please remember, Paul said it like this: I have been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives through me, right? And the life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who gave himself up for me. This servant leadership, this humility mindset, this I am dead, Christ is alive. Whenever you face situations like this, you have to ask, is Christ alive in me? Is Christ living through me right now? Because let me just tell you something. Jesus is not Republican or Democrat, okay? You do not, before you are any of those things, you are a Christ follower. You are responsible to exude the character of Jesus. And sometimes that doesn't fit into party lines. Sometimes that goes against the grain of what's normal. But our first response, our first priority is to the character of Jesus. And so in these situations, ask yourself, am I allowing Jesus to live through me? Am I allowing Christ, his character, to be exuded through my life, through my conversations? Or am I moving into pride? Am I moving into ego again? Am I moving to self? Am I getting in the way of Jesus? And so this is the first of many. This is by no means an exhaustive situation. I mean, we haven't talked about education on, the what happened after slavery was so-called abolished. And we talk about the black community being criminalized and then being brought back into so many things. There are so many things. I would encourage you, go get educated, go read some books, ask some of your black friends, what's some literature that I can pick up that can help me understand. I know a lot of people are scared that if they learn more about history, then it will nullify the history that they know. Listen, I love our country. I'm grateful for America. I'm grateful for the freedoms that we have. That doesn't mean that it's a perfect country. It doesn't mean that there haven't been things that have been horrible that have happened here that I may not be aware of. And so you gotta grow in your knowledge of history. Ask somebody for some resources. I'm sure that they will be more than willing to refer you to some things that can expand your mindset. Guys, you got anything, any last words, any last encouragement that you want to give?
Yeah, I would say to my black brothers, if a situation happens, don't let pride get in the way. We want you. We love you. Your mama loves you. Your wife, your sisters, if you have children, they love you. We have to always carry around with us, just like our phone keys and wallet, the spirit of discernment. The spirit of discernment cannot be something that you pray for in a second. It has to be a knee-jerk reaction. So when a situation like that happens, if it happens with you, swallow your pride. We want you here. Your soul is needed here. You affect people that nobody else can. So stay prayed up, stay in the sights of Christ, and swallow that pride.
My encouragement, man, is we're dealing with something that's generational, and so you need to make it a mark now, make it a determining factor now. If you want to make it a part of your legacy, to be a person of love, and the Bible said, and they will know how they love by how they love, right? They will know me by how they love. And so I think the biggest thing here is being one that you're not going to continue to, worry about not being something, but determine who you're going to be. And you're going to be a person of love. I'm going to be a person of acceptance. I'm going to be a person of this. And don't worry about what you're not going to be. Don't worry about not trying to look like this person. I know for me, that's why I've kind of always just kind of kept going, saying, man, I'm a man of God. I know that I'm a person of love. I'm a change agent. I know I can't change the way people think. I can't change the way people see, but I know that I can change me. And when I change me, I pray that then now I am setting a model, an example for others to desire to change themselves. So be the change you want to see in the world. And I guarantee you, man, when you do that, you have a sense of resolve with yourself that you are giving your best and you are doing your best. That's the best you can do. I guarantee you, man, this thing is bigger than all of us, and it's going to require all of us working together in order to see this thing truly taken down. So my encouragement at the end of the day is let's continue to march forward. Let's continue to focus on the future. Let's be future focused, and let's know that this thing is truly going to be taken care of, not by us trying to all the way just trying to call out hate and all that kind of stuff and bicker and argue and go back and forth, but truly us being instruments of love, agents of love, and continuing to bring forth love to this world. And the love of Christ is the best form of love that I know that I have, and I believe that this world needs.
Yeah. I think the church has such an opportunity to really be an example to the rest of the world of what it looks like for us to be in unity with one another and to prefer one another before our own needs. And so, E2, I hope that this has ministered to you tonight. I hope that maybe it didn't answer every question, but maybe it brought some light to things that you've been in the dark about. Maybe it inspired you with more questions. And I hope that that's the case, because I hope that this week in your e-groups and in the next week in your e-groups, you would start to have deeper conversations. And maybe you would ask somebody about their life and their upbringing that goes beyond just the surface. Hey, how are you doing? But really, tell me about yourself and what you've walked through in your life. And so, guys, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We're so grateful. Our church is better because of this conversation. And church, I want you to honor these two. Go follow them on social media, support them, encourage them. They're doing amazing things in their own spheres. And I know their life, their ministry will encourage you. I want to pray before we close out. And I believe that God's going to seal this work. And so, Father, I thank you so much for the opportunity we had to discuss this tonight. God, we know that not every issue has been resolved here, but I believe that as we continue the conversation, as we open up honest dialogue, maybe this message can impact somebody to go do the same in their community, in their relationships. God, that we can see racism, discrimination, prejudice. We can see it eliminated in our generation. God, I believe that the church can be the light of Christ, and I believe that we can shine that light on a dark world. So, God, I ask that you would use this moment in history, God, to spark something, God, in our church, in our city, and in our nation. God, we believe that you are the answer, that Jesus, you are the answer. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the answer. And so, God, we ask that you be lifted up as a banner over our communities. God, bring us together under that name and the blood of Jesus who've been shed for all of those who've been hurt, all of those who've been killed, all of those who've been beaten and lynched. God, your blood is shed for them. God, we pray that you'd bring comfort to those who are hurting right now. You bring peace, but you would also bring justice. God, we want to see this thing turn around. We need to see this thing turn around in our nation. We love you. We believe that the best is yet to come. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. 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 Thank you guys so much for joining in the conversation. I hope that you were inspired. Make sure that you share this with somebody. Share this experience. Share the link below. Put it on your social media. The more people involved in this conversation, the better. And I believe that E2 Church is going to be a light, a beacon of light in our city for not only equality, but for unification, unity amongst races, amongst cultures, so that we can really see this gospel go forward. We love you. We bless you. And we'll see you guys later. God bless.